The power died at 2:13 in the morning during the worst thunderstorm we'd had all year, and about 30 seconds later my father's oxygen machine started screaming. That sound still crawls up my spine when I think about it. 1 second the ranch was humming like always, rain hammering the tin roof, cattle sensors blinking red across the pasture, the smell of wet dirt drifting through the screen door. The next second, everything went black. No porch lights, no barn lights, no well pump, nothing. Then came the alarm from Dad's machine. Loud, sharp, panicked. I jumped out of bed, grabbed my flashlight, and ran down the hallway in bare feet, while thunder shook the windows hard enough to rattle the picture frames. Dad was sitting upright in bed, trying to catch his breath. "Clay," he wheezed. "Power's out." "I know," I told him. "Stay calm." But here's the thing. Ranch power doesn't just magically fail. Not ours. I maintain backup systems better than most hospitals maintain theirs. That ranch had 2 generators, surge protection, battery reserves, and a dedicated transformer line running from County Road 14 straight through my property. Somebody didn't just flip a switch. Somebody killed it on purpose. I grabbed the portable oxygen tank, got Dad breathing steady again, then stepped out onto the porch into cold Texas rain. Wind bent the oak trees sideways. Mud sucked at my boots. Lightning flashed over the pasture, bright enough for me to see cattle bunching near the south fence, nervous without the electric barriers running. And then I saw headlights near the front gate. White SUV, hazard lights blinking, big reflective letters on the side. HOA patrol. I actually laughed for a second because my brain refused to believe anybody could be stupid enough to pull something like this during a storm. But Patricia Thornwell had never had a problem confusing confidence with intelligence. I drove the ATV down toward the gate with rain hitting my face like gravel. The closer I got, the angrier I became. Utility shed door hanging open. Transformer box unlocked. Heavy cables rerouted out toward the new subdivision next door. And standing there in a yellow rain jacket like she owned. The county was Patricia herself. Perfect makeup somehow still intact. Blonde hair tucked into a designer hood. One hand on her hip, the other holding a flashlight under the rain. Behind her stood 2 HOA patrol guys pretending they were law enforcement because somebody gave them black jackets and cheap radios from Amazon. One deputy from the county stood off to the side, looking uncomfortable as hell. Patricia spotted me and smiled. Not a nervous smile. Not a guilty smile. A victory smile. "Your ranch has excess emergency power capacity," she yelled over the storm. "The subdivision has priority access during severe weather events." I stared at her for a long moment, rain dripping off my hat brim. "You stole power from a medical oxygen system," I said. "No," she snapped back. "We redistributed community resources." Community resources. That was her favorite phrase. Patricia used it anytime she wanted something that belonged to somebody else. Roads, land, water access, fence easements. Didn't matter. If she wanted it, suddenly it became community infrastructure. One of the HOA patrol idiots stepped forward holding bolt cutters like he was proud of himself. "Sir, this is authorized under emergency HOA procedures." HOA procedures. On my ranch. During a county storm emergency. Big mistake. Real big mistake. But I didn't yell. Didn't threaten anybody. Didn't flash a badge. Didn't do any of the things people expect tough guys to do in stories like this. I just looked down at the cut lock lying in the mud beside my utility shed. Then I looked at the deputy standing there in the rain, avoiding eye contact. "You boys got body cams running?" I asked quietly. Both HOA patrol guys froze. The deputy finally looked up at me. Patricia's smile slipped just a little. Not enough for most people to notice. But I noticed. Oh yeah, right there in the middle of the storm, the whole thing shifted. She still thought she was in control. But suddenly everyone else started wondering why I was so calm. And trust me, when somebody stays calm while their ranch is sitting dark in a thunderstorm, there's usually a reason. What would you do if your HOA cut power to your house during a storm? I swear some of these people think rules matter more than human lives. Drop a comment below because this night only got crazier from there. By sunrise, half that subdivision was about to learn the difference between fake authority and real law. People think a ranch is just dirt and cows until they spend one night trying to keep one alive during a Texas storm. That place was not some vacation property I visited twice a year. It was my whole life. 240 acres passed down through 3 generations of Dawsons. My grandfather cleared the north pasture himself with an old tractor that barely ran half the time. My dad built the cattle barn in the summer of 1987 during a drought so bad the creek dried into cracked mud. And me? I came home after the Marines because no matter where I went, this land kept pulling me back. You could smell rain on cedar before the clouds even rolled in. You could hear cattle shifting through tall grass a quarter-mile away if the wind hit right. Out here, silence was not empty. It was peace. That ranch raised me before any school did. I learned to drive in an old feed truck before I was tall enough to see over the steering wheel. Learned how to mend fences, track storms, and keep promises. My father used to tell me, a man who takes care of his land takes care of his people. I did not understand what that meant when I was 10 years old. I understood it real while the night Patricia cut power to our place. Dad had been sick for almost 4 years by then. Chronic obstructive pulmonary disease. Bad lungs from decades of dust, diesel fumes, and ranch work. Some days he sounded fine. Other days, every breath looked like hard labor. He hated the oxygen machine, said it made him feel weak. But without electricity, that machine was just a plastic box sitting beside his bed. That is why what Patricia did made me so angry. Not because she broke rules. Because she gambled with somebody else's life like it was a parking dispute. Let me back up a little because none of this started with power lines. It started when developers discovered our side of the county. For decades, this area was cattle land, hay fields, and old farmhouses, with rusty mailboxes. Then suddenly city people started showing up talking about luxury country living. They wanted the ranch lifestyle without the ranch part. They built giant beige houses on tiny lots and gave neighborhoods fake rustic names like Cedar Creek Estates, even though they bulldozed half the cedar trees to build them. Then came the HOA. Of course it did. Patricia Thornwell moved in about 18 months before the storm. White Escalade, perfect hair, sunglasses bigger than my hand, the kind of smile that never looked real. She acted friendly at first. They always do. First time we met, she walked onto my porch carrying banana bread. She clearly did not bake herself. "We are so excited to join the community," she said while looking around my ranch like she was pricing it. I remember Dad sitting in his chair quietly watching her through the screen door. She kept talking about property values and modernization and future growth corridors. Dad leaned over and muttered, "That woman talks like a shopping mall." I almost laughed coffee through my nose. But he was right. Patricia did not see land the way ranchers do. To her, land was leverage. A thing to control. A thing to monetize. Within 6 months, she had turned that subdivision into a little kingdom. HOA patrol trucks. Compliance notices. Landscaping fines. Noise complaints about cattle trucks before sunrise. I wish I was joking about that one. One morning her people actually complained that my ranch smelled too agricultural when the wind shifted east. Too agricultural. In cattle country. You cannot make this stuff up. But the weird part? Patricia never came after me directly at first. She circled around the edges. Tried buying easements from neighbors. Tried pushing county commissioners into widening roads through private land. Tried claiming emergency access rights through old ranch trails. Every conversation with her felt like a test run for something bigger. And here's what really bothered me. She always acted too confident. Like she knew something nobody else did. Most people threatening lawsuits bluff loud. Patricia stayed calm. Organized. Patient. That is dangerous. The night before the storm, one of my neighbors called me around dinner time. Old man named Walter Griggs. Lives about 3 miles west of me. "Clay," he said, "you seen those HOA boys snooping around utility poles?" I had not, but I started paying attention after that. Around 10 that night, I noticed subdivision lights blazing brighter than usual even with half the county under storm warnings. Then I saw maintenance trucks moving near the back access road by the transformer easement. At the time, I thought maybe the utility company was doing emergency prep work. Big mistake. Because by 2:13 in the morning, my ranch went black and Patricia Thornwell finally stopped pretending she respected property lines. The thing about people like Patricia Thornwell is they never start with the big move. They test fences first. Little things. Small pushes. They want to see who folds. About 6 months before the storm, she tried pulling that stunt with my west pasture gate. I came home from town and found one of those bright orange survey flags tied to my fence posts. Then another. Then another. At first, I thought maybe the county was checking drainage lines after heavy rain. But when I followed the markers, they ran straight across my property toward the subdivision pump station. That got my attention real fast. I drove over there the next morning and found 3 HOA patrol guys standing beside a utility trailer drinking coffee like they owned the place. One of them had a clipboard. Another had bolt cutters hanging off his belt for no reason I could figure out. And parked right in the middle of my ranch road was Patricia's white Escalade, shining like a refrigerator in the Texas sun. She stepped out smiling before I even killed the engine. "Good morning, Clayton," she said all sweet. "We are evaluating emergency infrastructure expansion options for the community." Community. There was that word again. "You are standing on private ranch land," I told her. "No easement crosses this pasture." She tilted her head like I was being difficult on purpose. "Actually, our legal team believes historical access rights may apply here." Historical access rights. Sounds fancy until you realize it usually means rich people trying to invent permission after the fact. I pointed toward the county road less than half a mile away. "You already have access from the public side." Patricia smiled wider. "That route is less efficient." Less efficient. She said it like efficiency mattered more than ownership. One of the HOA patrol guys started measuring my gate, while another snapped pictures of my transformer pole. That was the first moment my instincts really kicked in. They were not interested in roads. They were studying utilities. Water. Power. Access points. Infrastructure. Things people usually ignore until they stop working. "You boys planning on asking permission before touching my equipment?" I asked. Clipboard guy laughed under his breath. Patricia answered for him. "The subdivision has grown faster than projected. We need to think about future emergencies. Future emergencies do not give you rights to my ranch." Her smile faded for about half a second. Then it came back colder than before. That kind of attitude is exactly why rural communities struggle to modernize. I almost laughed. Modernize. That woman talked about ranchers like we were broken tractors she wanted to replace. But here is what really bothered me. She never acted worried. Most people back down when they realize they are standing on private land arguing with the owner. Patricia did not. She looked prepared, confident, like somebody had promised her she would win eventually. Dad noticed it too. That night, he sat on the porch wrapped in an old flannel blanket while the sunset hit the pasture gold and orange. "That woman is not after your gate," he said quietly. "She is after control." Dad had a way of saying things simple enough to stick in your head for years. 3 days later, I found fresh tire tracks cutting across my north field before sunrise. Deep tracks. Utility trailer tracks. Somebody had driven all the way to the transformer easement behind the cattle barn. I followed them through wet grass until I found new inspection tags zip-tied to my power equipment. Not county tags. HOA tags. Can you believe that? These people made their own inspection stickers like they were some kind of government agency. One bright yellow tag actually read Community Grid Authority in bold black letters. I stood there staring at it thinking there was no way grown adults could honestly believe this nonsense. Big mistake. They absolutely believed it. Or at least Patricia did. A week after that, she held one of her giant HOA meetings at the subdivision clubhouse. My deputy, Ethan Morales, went because his sister lived there. Next morning, he walked into my office looking like he had swallowed a bee. "Sheriff," he said carefully, "you might want to hear this." Turns out Patricia stood in front of 200 homeowners beside a projector screen talking about energy redistribution plans. She claimed nearby ranch properties were using excess infrastructure resources that could be redirected for public benefit during emergency conditions. Public benefit. Another fancy phrase meaning take somebody else's stuff. Ethan told me she even showed aerial photos of my ranch on the projector. My barns. My utility shed. My transformer line. My house. People clapped, Ethan said quietly. They think she is protecting the neighborhood. That was the moment I realized this thing had grown bigger than annoying HOA drama. Patricia was building her own version of authority. Fake authority. The dangerous kind. The kind that gets people hurt because everybody assumes somebody else checked the law first. And the craziest part? Nobody in that clubhouse knew the quiet rancher Patricia kept targeting was the same man signing every county enforcement order sitting downtown at the sheriff's office. About 2 weeks before the storm, Patricia decided pretending was not enough anymore. That was when the notices started showing up. Real official-looking papers. Thick envelopes. Bright red lettering. Words like emergency compliance and utility cooperation requirements stamped across the top, like some federal agency had written them. Dad handed me the first one at breakfast while I was frying eggs. Looks expensive, he muttered. I opened it and almost laughed. According to Patricia's precious HOA board, my ranch had been identified as a critical support property for subdivision emergency infrastructure. Stabilization. That sounds complicated until you translate it into plain English. They wanted to use my power systems whenever they felt like it. The craziest part? They acted like I had already agreed. There was even a highlighted sentence saying failure to cooperate may result in legal enforcement measures. Legal enforcement. By a homeowners association. On private agricultural land outside their subdivision boundaries. These people had fully left reality behind. Dad read the paper over his coffee and snorted. Since when did golf cart people become the government? That old man had a gift for one-liners. I drove over to the subdivision clubhouse that afternoon because I wanted to hear Patricia explain this nonsense to my face. The place looked like a resort lobby. Fake stone walls. Fancy chandeliers. Lemon-scented air fresheners pumping through vents. Every golf cart lined up outside spotless like little toy soldiers. Patricia stood near the front desk talking to two HOA patrol guys in matching black jackets. They actually had shoulder patches now. Not kidding. Patches. Clayton, she said with that polished smile. I was hoping you would come discuss cooperation. You sent legal threats to my ranch. We sent emergency preparedness notices. You do not control county utilities. She folded her arms calmly. The subdivision has over 400 residents now. We cannot risk unstable infrastructure during severe weather events. Then build your own infrastructure. Her smile tightened a little. That would be significantly more expensive. There it was. Finally, the truth. This whole thing was about money. They overloaded their own system building luxury homes too fast, and now Patricia wanted my ranch carrying the burden. Not my problem, I told her. One of the HOA patrol guys stepped closer, trying to look intimidating. Mid-20s. Buzz cut. Probably failed out of mall security school. Sir, refusal to cooperate during emergency planning can expose you to liability. I looked at him for a second. Son, do you even know what liability means? Patricia jumped in before he answered. We are trying to avoid conflict. That woman said conflict the same way. Snakes probably say relax. Then she slid a folder across the front desk toward me. Inside were aerial maps of my ranch. Utility diagrams. Transformer locations. Backup generator specs. Even photos of my equipment shed. Somebody had spent serious time studying my property. My stomach turned cold flipping through those pages. Where did you get this? I asked. Patricia smiled like she had been waiting for that question. Public infrastructure assessments. Public. Another favorite word of hers. Funny how everything became public once she wanted access to it. You have exactly zero rights to any of this equipment, I told her. Actually, she said softly, our attorneys disagree. That was her first mistake. Threatening lawyers only works if the other person scares easy. I had spent 20 years dealing with lawsuits, fraud cases, property disputes, and people trying to weaponize rules they barely understood. I knew exactly what real legal authority looked like. Patricia was playing dress-up with paperwork, but I still stayed calm. That part matters. People always think winning means yelling louder. Most of the time winning means letting the other side keep talking until they bury themselves. So I took the folder, thanked her politely, and walked out. Patricia probably thought she had rattled me. Truth was, she had just handed me proof they were tracking private infrastructure without permission. Big difference. 3 days later, things escalated again. I woke up before sunrise to the sound of engines near the cattle barn. When I stepped outside with coffee in hand, 2 HOA patrol trucks were parked beside my utility shed. One guy stood on a ladder near the transformer pole, while another was opening electrical access panels with tools spread across my workbench, just helping themselves like they owned the place. What exactly do you think you are doing? I asked. The guy on the ladder nearly dropped his flashlight. Clipboard boy from before climbed out of the truck holding another fake authorization packet. Routine emergency compatibility inspection, he said quickly. Patricia approved it. Patricia approved it. That line almost made me smile. They honestly believed HOA approval outrank property law. Get off my ranch, I said. Immediately. One patrol guy muttered something under his breath about uncooperative landowners while they packed up. But before leaving, Clipboard boy pointed at my transformer and said something that stuck in my head all day. That system is bigger than one ranch needs anyway. Bigger than one ranch needs. That was not random jealousy talking. That was planning. And standing there in morning fog watching those trucks disappear down my dirt road, I realized Patricia Thornwell had already decided my property belonged to her. She was just looking for the easiest way to take it. The storm should have been enough to scare Patricia into backing off. Normal people would have realized they crossed a line after shutting down oxygen equipment during a county emergency. Patricia was not normal people. By sunrise the next morning, she was already spinning the whole thing online like she was some kind of hero. I found out because my phone started blowing up before 6 in the morning. Neighbors texting me screenshots. HOA residents posting about how Patricia saved the subdivision grid during the storm. One woman actually called the HOA patrol brave first responders. First responders. These clowns had bolt cutters and matching jackets from the internet. But the crazy part? People believed it because Patricia sounded official. That is the dangerous thing about fake authority. If somebody speaks confidently enough, half the world stops asking questions. I walked outside after checking on Dad and found the ranch still half dark. Backup generators were running rough because the system had been tampered with. One cattle trough pump had already failed overnight. Mud everywhere. Fence alarms offline. Rain still drizzling sideways through the pasture. Then my phone rang again. Walter Griggs. He sounded furious. Clay, you need to get down here. What happened? Your HOA queen just turned half the West Road into a parking lot. I drove over and could not believe what I saw. Patricia had opened the subdivision clubhouse as a storm shelter for residents after the power flickered overnight. Sounds nice, right? Except their overflow parking had spilled onto private ranch access roads. Trucks blocking feed deliveries. SUVs parked beside cattle fencing. Kids running around near equipment sheds while HOA patrol guys stood there acting like security guards at a concert. Patricia spotted me stepping out of the truck and waved like we were old friends. Clayton, she called cheerfully. Wonderful timing. We are organizing emergency operations. On private roads? Her smile tightened. County emergency conditions require flexibility. There it was again. She kept using county language. Emergency operations. Infrastructure coordination. Compliance actions. She wanted people to hear government words so they would stop noticing she was just an HOA president with too much money and too little restraint. Walter walked over red-faced and soaked from rain. Her people moved my cattle trailer without asking, he snapped. One of them told my grandson this area belongs to the community now. Patricia turned toward him immediately. Sir, please remain calm. Everyone is stressed during severe weather. Walter nearly exploded. Do not tell me to remain calm on my own land. That was when another problem rolled in. Literally. Volunteer Fire Station 8 sits about 4 miles east of us. Small station. Mostly old ranchers and retired mechanics volunteering part-time. Their brush truck pulled up with lights flashing because somebody reported blocked emergency access roads. Captain Morales stepped out looking exhausted. We need this route clear, he told Patricia. Emergency vehicles cannot get through. Patricia actually crossed her arms and argued with a volunteer fire captain during an active storm response. The subdivision residents need organized shelter access. Morales pointed at the traffic jam behind her. Ma'am, if a grass fire starts with these roads blocked, people could die. She still did not move the vehicles. That was the moment people around us started looking uncomfortable. Not scared. Uncomfortable. Like they were finally realizing maybe Patricia had gone too far. But she still was not done. Around noon another call came in from the north side of the county. Elderly. Couple named the Bennetts lost refrigeration for insulin medication after HOA patrol rerouted temporary generator support away from their utility junction. Why? Because the subdivision clubhouse wanted extra power for air conditioning units and kitchen equipment. I wish I was joking. Patricia prioritized comfort over medical refrigeration during a storm emergency. Deputy Ethan Morales walked into my office later that afternoon, carrying 3 printed complaints and looking sick to his stomach. Sheriff, this thing is getting ugly. He laid the reports across my desk. Illegal utility tampering. Unauthorized road obstruction. Private property access violations. Then he lowered his voice. We also pulled traffic cameras near the transformer easement. And Ethan swallowed hard. The HOA patrol trucks were there almost 6 hours before the outage. 6 hours. Which meant the storm was not some last-minute emergency excuse. They planned this. That changed everything. I leaned back in my chair staring at those reports while rain tapped against the office windows. Patricia had gotten greedy. Greedy people always make the same mistake eventually. They stop hiding. They start believing their own story. By evening, her live streams got even worse. She stood in the subdivision clubhouse wearing a reflective emergency vest, talking into a camera while residents applauded behind her. "Strong leadership protects communities during uncertain times," she announced. "We cannot allow outdated rural resistance to threaten modern infrastructure stability." Rural resistance. That was me apparently. A rancher trying to keep oxygen running for his father and water flowing for cattle. Meanwhile, Patricia was standing under borrowed electricity, giving speeches beside catered coffee trays. Dad watched one of the videos from his recliner and shook his head slowly. "Son," he said quietly, "that woman thinks the badge belongs to whoever talks loudest." I looked back down at the complaints on my desk. Fake emergency notices. Fake authority patches. Fake inspection tags. Illegal utility rerouting. Trespassing. Road obstruction. Infrastructure tampering. The pile was getting bigger by the hour. And Patricia Thornwell still had absolutely no idea whose desk those reports were landing on. The next morning, I stopped thinking about Patricia Thornwell as an annoying HOA president and started treating her like what she really was. A liability. There is a big difference. Annoying people waste your time. Liabilities get people hurt. I was sitting at the kitchen table before sunrise drinking burnt coffee while rainwater dripped off my jacket onto the floor. Dad was asleep again with the backup oxygen tank beside his chair. The house smelled like diesel from the generators and wet cedar from the storm. Quiet. Heavy kind of quiet. Then Ethan Morales walked through the front door carrying a cardboard file box. "You are going to want to see this," he said. Inside the box were copies of every complaint filed against Patricia's HOA patrol over the last 8 months. Trespassing reports. Utility complaints. Road obstruction calls. Harassment claims. Most of them minor by themselves. But stacked together? Whole different story. One rancher reported HOA patrol photographing fuel tanks without permission. Another complained about fake inspection notices taped to private barns. Somebody else claimed HOA volunteers threatened fines over water runoff outside subdivision boundaries. Patricia had been testing limits all over the county for months. Small pushes, little violations, seeing who would fight back and who would stay quiet. Ethan dropped another folder onto the table. Utility companies sent these over too. That folder changed everything. According to the records, Patricia's subdivision had failed 2 separate electrical load inspections during expansion construction. Twice. Engineers warned the development was drawing more power than the local grid was designed to support. Instead of upgrading legally, somebody started creating what the documents called temporary redistribution strategies. Redistribution. Funny how thieves always rename stealing to sound professional. I flipped through page after page while Ethan stood there watching me carefully. Temporary bypass proposals. Emergency rerouting drafts. Infrastructure cooperation requests. And buried in the middle of it all was my ranch transformer easement map, with yellow highlighter circles around every major power junction on my land. "They have been planning this for months," Ethan said quietly. "Long before the storm. Big mistake, Patricia. Real big mistake. Planning changes everything legally. Emergencies can create confusion. Planning creates intent." I drove into town an hour later and headed straight for the county records office. Old brick building. Smells like dust, old paper, and burnt coffee no matter what year it is. Miss Evelyn Harper still worked the records desk after almost 30 years. Tiny woman. Sharp eyes. Knows more county history than half the commissioners combined. She looked up when I walked in carrying the folders. "Morning, Sheriff," she said. "You look like somebody backed a truck over your dog. Need easement filings connected to Cedar Ridge Estates." Her eyebrows lifted immediately. "That woman again. You know Patricia?" Evelyn snorted. "Honey, half the county knows Patricia." She disappeared into the archive room while I sat there listening to old fluorescent lights buzz overhead. 10 minutes later, she came back, carrying a stack of property filings thick enough to stop a door. "Something about those papers bothered me months ago," she admitted quietly. "Could not put my finger on it." We spread everything across the records table. Easement requests. Utility permits. Environmental reviews. Most looked normal at first glance. Then I noticed the signatures. Same engineering consultant signing different dates in different handwriting styles. County reference numbers out of sequence. One permit stamp slightly crooked compared to authentic county seals. Tiny details. But details matter. Paperwork has a funny way of making loud people quiet. This one is fake, Evelyn said suddenly, tapping a utility authorization page. County never issued this revision code. My stomach tightened. You sure? She gave me the look only old county clerks can give. The kind that says, boy, I was filing records before you learned long division. Sheriff, I would bet my retirement on it. There it was. Finally. Real proof. Not suspicion. Not rumors. Forged county. Utility paperwork. Suddenly, every fake inspection tag and emergency notice started making sense. Patricia was not just pretending to have authority. Somebody inside her operation was manufacturing authority. I called the utility company from the records office. Regional supervisor named Daniel Reeves answered after 2 transfers. Nice guy? Sounded exhausted. The moment I mentioned transformer rerouting, his whole tone changed. Sheriff, we did not authorize any private emergency transfers to that subdivision. Not even during the storm? Especially not during the storm. Whoever touched those lines could have overloaded the entire circuit. I leaned back slowly in the chair. Could somebody have died? Silence on the line for about 3 seconds. Yes, Daniel said quietly. Absolutely. That hit hard. Harder than I expected. Because suddenly I pictured Dad's oxygen machine shutting down again. Volunteer firefighters blocked by subdivision traffic. Refrigerated medication warming up in dark kitchens. Cattle water systems failing. Patricia treated infrastructure like a social club project because she never understood what real systems protect. Real systems keep people alive. I spent the rest of the afternoon reviewing body cam footage from the storm response. Most of it looked exactly how I remembered. Rain. Mud. Chaos. But one clip froze everybody in the room when we replayed it. One HOA patrol guy stood beside the transformer truck laughing while another said, Patricia said once this reroute works, the county will have to approve permanent integration. Permanent integration. They were not borrowing power during an emergency. They were trying to force a permanent dependency onto my ranch infrastructure. Ethan looked over at me carefully. Sheriff, they were setting you up. No, worse than that. Patricia Thornwell thought she had already won. And people who think they already won usually get sloppy right before everything falls apart. Most people think big scandals fall apart with explosions and screaming matches. Real ones usually fall apart because somebody gets arrogant enough to leave paper trails. Patricia Thornwell had started believing she was untouchable, and that made her careless. 2 days after we found the forged county permits, Ethan Morales came flying into my office holding a flash drive like he had just found buried treasure. You are not going to believe this, he said. Turns out one of the HOA patrol guys quit after the storm mess. Kid named Brandon Pike, 23 years old, barely old enough to rent a car. Apparently, Patricia chewed him out during a clubhouse meeting because residents complained online about blocked emergency roads. Brandon got mad, packed up his little fake tactical vest, and sent a whole folder of internal HOA files to the county complaint portal before quitting. Bless that angry little idiot. Inside the files were meeting recordings, expense spreadsheets, internal patrol schedules, and enough bad decisions to sink a cruise ship. Ethan plugged the drive into my office computer while both of us leaned toward the screen. First video opened to Patricia standing in front of a projector at the clubhouse. Same polished smile. Same expensive blazer. Behind her was a giant map of the subdivision and surrounding ranch land. My ranch highlighted in bright yellow. Once integration is complete, Patricia said in the recording, the county will have no choice but to recognize shared infrastructure dependency. I paused the video immediately. Shared infrastructure dependency. There it was. The real plan. They were trying to force legal dependency onto my ranch utilities by creating a crisis first. Ethan stared at me. That sounds insane. Because it is insane. But insane does not mean impossible. People pull crazy stunts when enough money gets involved. And there was a lot of money involved. The next spreadsheet explained why. Cedar Ridge Estates was drowning financially. Way over budget. Massive construction loans. Emergency contractor fees. Deferred utility upgrades. Turns out Patricia and the HOA board had promised residents luxury infrastructure they never actually paid for. Fancy lighting. Backup power systems. Storm protection upgrades. Problem was, the subdivision grid could not support half of it. Instead of fixing the issue legally, Patricia tried stealing support. Infrastructure from surrounding ranch properties piece by piece. Easements, access roads, power reroutes, temporary emergency authority. Every fake notice suddenly made sense. Look at this, Ethan said, pointing at another file. It was an email chain between Patricia and a private contractor called Lone Mesa Utility Solutions. One message read, "Existing county transformer capacity on Dawson property sufficient for permanent overflow stabilization if emergency crossover becomes normalized." I leaned back slowly in my chair. They had not just planned temporary theft. They planned permanent integration from the beginning. My ranch was supposed to quietly become the subdivision's unpaid support grid while Patricia spun it as community cooperation. Big mistake, because hidden inside those same emails was something even worse. Fraudulent billing. Lone Mesa had been charging the HOA for emergency infrastructure expansion work. That never happened. Hundreds of thousands of dollars missing. Fake inspections. Duplicate invoices. Payments for phantom utility upgrades. Patricia was not just power hungry. Somebody was skimming money too. Ethan whistled low. This thing keeps getting uglier. He was right. But the moment everything truly clicked together happened later that afternoon at the utility company yard. Daniel Rees walked me through the actual transformer maps in person. We stood inside a giant warehouse smelling like machine oil and hot metal while rain tapped on the roof overhead. He spread engineering blueprints across a steel table and pointed directly at my ranch easement. "Your property is the backbone junction for this entire section of county grid," he explained. "Always has been. Meaning if your transformer line legally disconnects from Cedar Ridge Estates, half that subdivision loses certification for emergency occupancy." I stared at him. "You are telling me those homes cannot legally operate without access through my ranch?" Daniel nodded slowly. "Their developers were supposed to build independent backup capacity 2 years ago. They never finished it." Suddenly, Patricia's obsession made perfect sense. She was not trying to improve her subdivision. She was trying to hide the fact it never should have been approved at full expansion in the first place. Without my infrastructure, the whole illusion collapsed. Luxury homes, emergency systems, storm certification, fire suppression support. All of it depended on utility access crossing my land. And she knew it. That was why she kept pushing fake authority so hard. Because once residents learned the truth, they would realize they bought $700,000 homes tied to incomplete infrastructure. I drove home that evening through muddy ranch roads thinking about how many people Patricia dragged into this mess. Families, retirees, kids. Most of those homeowners probably believed they lived in a safe luxury subdivision. They had no clue their HOA president was improvising emergency systems with stolen ranch utilities and forged permits. Dad was sitting on the porch when I got back. Oxygen machine humming softly beside him while sunset lit the pasture orange. "You look like you solved something," he said. "I figured out why Patricia keeps pushing." Dad nodded once. "Money. Worse. Exposure." I explained the dependency issue while he listened quietly. When I finished, he stared out toward the subdivision lights glowing in the distance. "So if your ranch disconnects legally," he said slowly, "that whole fancy kingdom falls apart." "Pretty much." Dad chuckled weakly into his coffee cup. "Funny thing about fake empires, son. They always need somebody else's foundation underneath." And right there on that porch with storm clouds finally breaking over the pasture, I realized Patricia Thornwell had trapped herself. She thought she was building leverage. What she actually built was evidence. Patricia Thornwell made one final mistake the following Thursday night. She scheduled a giant emergency HOA town hall and invited half the county. Residents packed into the Cedar Ridge clubhouse, carrying coffee cups and folding chairs while HOA patrol guys walked around pretending they were federal agents. Somebody even parked 2 patrol trucks outside the entrance with flashing amber lights running like it was a disaster command center. The whole thing looked ridiculous, but people were nervous. Storm damage still had everybody rattled, and Patricia knew fear makes people easier to control. I showed up early wearing jeans, work boots, and my old brown ranch jacket. No uniform, no badge visible, just quiet. That bothered Patricia more than yelling ever would have. She spotted me near the back wall and smiled that tight little smile she used whenever she thought she was about to win. "Glad you could make it, Clayton, she said loudly enough for nearby residents to hear. Tonight should clear up some confusion about infrastructure cooperation. Cooperation. Another one of her favorite fake polite words. I grabbed coffee from the refreshment table and sat near the back beside Ethan Morales. Everybody wired up. I asked quietly. Ethan nodded once. Deputies were already outside. Utility investigators too. County attorney parked 2 blocks away waiting for my signal. We had bodycam footage, forged permits, fake inspection records, utility fraud documents, internal HOA recordings, and enough witness statements to sink the whole operation. But here is the thing people never understand about investigations. Timing matters. If you move too early, smart people wiggle free. You let them talk first. Let them commit fully to the lie. Patricia walked to the front of the clubhouse right at 7 sharp while soft piano music played through speakers overhead. Giant projector screen behind her showed a glowing subdivision logo beside the words Emergency Infrastructure Leadership Forum. I almost laughed coffee through my nose. She started with her usual speech voice. Calm, confident, corporate. During last week's severe weather event, she announced, our community faced unprecedented infrastructure instability caused by outdated regional utility systems. Outdated regional utility systems apparently meant my ranch. Residents nodded along while HOA board members sat behind her looking serious. Patricia clicked the remote and aerial photos appeared on the screen. My ranch. My transformer easement. Utility maps. Certain surrounding properties, she continued carefully, have unfortunately resisted modern integration efforts necessary. For public safety. There it was. She was setting me up publicly. Again. One resident raised his hand. Are you saying neighboring landowners caused the outage? Patricia sighed dramatically like she hated delivering bad news. I am saying personal resistance to emergency cooperation endangered hundreds of families. Ethan looked sideways at me. She is really doing this, he muttered. Oh yeah, she was all in now. Patricia kept talking for another 10 minutes. Every sentence dug her deeper. She claimed HOA patrol coordinated emergency utility stabilization. Claimed temporary rerouting protected residents. Claimed county representatives were aware of all emergency actions. That last line nearly made me smile. Then came the best part. Patricia clicked to the final slide and folded her hands confidently. Moving forward, she announced, we will pursue permanent infrastructure integration agreements to ensure no private individual can jeopardize community safety again. Private individual. That was me. She was trying to publicly pressure me into surrendering ranch utility control in front of hundreds of angry homeowners. Big mistake. Real big mistake. Because the moment she finished talking, somebody near the front asked the question she absolutely did not want. Does the county actually approve all this? Patricia answered instantly. Too instantly. Yes. We have worked closely with county authorities throughout this process. That was my cue. I stood up slowly from the back row. Whole room turned quiet. Patricia saw me standing and her expression shifted just a little. Tiny crack in the armor. Actually, I said calmly, that is not true. You could feel the room tighten. Patricia forced a smile. Clayton, this is not the time for emotional disruptions. Emotional disruptions. I started walking toward the front anyway. Boots echoing across the clubhouse floor. You forged county utility authorization forms, I said. You illegally rerouted infrastructure during an active storm emergency. You obstructed emergency vehicle access. You trespassed onto private agricultural property multiple times. Patricia laughed nervously. That is absurd. Then the clubhouse doors opened behind me. 6 county deputies stepped inside wearing full sheriff department jackets. Dead silent room. Residents twisting around in their seats. HOA patrol guys suddenly looked a whole lot less confident. Ethan walked forward beside me carrying the evidence folders while Utilities Supervisor Daniel Reeves rolled in a cart stacked with infrastructure maps. Patricia's face drained white. Slowly, very slowly, I reached inside my jacket pocket and pulled out my sheriff badge. Not dramatic. Not flashy. Just set it down quietly on the front table beside Patricia's projector remote. The sound it made hitting the table was tiny, but I swear half that room stopped breathing. One HOA board member whispered, "Oh my God." Patricia stared at the badge like it was a snake. "You," she started. "County Sheriff Clayton Dawson," I said calmly. "And this meeting is now part of an active criminal investigation." Absolute chaos hit the room. Residents shouting. HOA board members panicking. One HOA patrol guy tried slipping toward the exit before Deputy Morales stopped him cold. Daniel Reeves plugged his laptop into Patricia's projector system, and suddenly the giant screen behind her filled with evidence. Forged permits, fake inspection tags, internal HOA emails, utility fraud spreadsheets. Then came the body cam footage from the storm night. Patricia standing beside my transformer while HOA patrol cut locks and rerouted power. Somebody in the crowd shouted, "You said this was legal." Another resident yelled, "Our homes are not even properly certified." Patricia looked around wildly like she still thought she could talk her way out of it. "These are misunderstandings," she stammered. "Emergency actions required flexibility." That was when Evelyn Harper from County Records walked forward holding the forged utility permits in plastic evidence sleeves. Sweet little old Evelyn adjusted her glasses and said loud enough for everybody to hear, "Honey, these county seals are faker than a $3 bill." Half the room exploded at once. The fallout hit Cedar Ridge Estates faster than a Texas hailstorm. By the next morning, news vans were parked outside the subdivision entrance while residents stood in bathrobes yelling at HOA board members beside the clubhouse fountain. Half the neighborhood looked shell-shocked. The other half looked ready to riot. Turns out people get real angry when they discover the luxury homes they bought depend on stolen infrastructure and forged permits. Patricia Thornwell got escorted out of the clubhouse just after midnight, wearing the same cream blazer from her little speech. Only difference was she did not look polished anymore. Mascara streaked, hair falling apart, hands shaking while deputies walked her to an unmarked county vehicle. She kept trying to talk over everybody. "This is political retaliation," she snapped. "You cannot criminalize emergency leadership." Deputy Morales answered her perfectly. "Ma'am, cutting power to oxygen equipment is not leadership." That shut her up real fast. Over the next few weeks, the whole thing unraveled piece by piece. State investigators froze HOA financial accounts after discovering hundreds of thousands of dollars missing from infrastructure budgets. Lone Mesa Utility Solutions lost its contractor license almost immediately. 2 utility inspectors resigned before the county could even question them officially. One HOA board member tried blaming everything on Patricia during an emergency resident meeting and accidentally admitted they knew the subdivision failed electrical certification 2 years earlier. Big mistake. Lawyers practically smelled blood in the air after that. Lawsuits started stacking up like hay bales before winter. Residents sued the HOA. The HOA sued contractors. Contractors sued consultants. Everybody suddenly pretended they barely knew Patricia Thornwell. Funny how fast loyalty disappears once subpoenas show up. But honestly, the people I felt worst for were the homeowners. Most of them were regular families who thought they bought safe homes in a nice neighborhood. They trusted fancy presentations, polished sales pitches, and official-sounding language. They never imagined the entire setup rested on fake emergency authority and stolen ranch infrastructure. One young couple stopped me outside the grocery store about a month later. Baby stroller. Exhausted faces. The husband looked embarrassed even talking to me. "Sheriff," he said quietly, "we really thought she was protecting the community." I nodded. That is how people like Patricia work. They make control sound like safety. He looked down at the stroller and sighed. "Wish we had asked more questions." That right there is the whole lesson, honestly. Most abuse of power survives because people stop asking questions once somebody sounds important enough. Meanwhile, life at the ranch slowly returned to normal. Utility crews installed completely independent grid systems for the subdivision under emergency county supervision. Cost a fortune too. Turns out building infrastructure legally is a lot more expensive than stealing it from your neighbors. My transformer easement got reinforced with county-monitored access controls and permanent surveillance after the investigation closed. Nobody touched my utility shed again. Dad enjoyed that part maybe more than anybody. One evening we sat on the porch watching a crew pour concrete around the new protected transformer barriers while cattle moved slowly through sunset light across the pasture. "Looks expensive," he said with a grin. "Taxpayers are not paying for it." I answered. "HOA settlement funds are." He laughed so hard he started coughing. Even the volunteer fire station got upgrades after the county emergency review exposed how badly blocked roads could have turned during the storm. Captain Morales stopped by the ranch a few weeks later carrying barbecue and a stack of new emergency route maps. You know, he said while staring toward the subdivision. If that grass fire had started during the outage mess, this whole county could have been in serious trouble. I know. He shook his head slowly. All because one woman wanted control. But it was never really just about control. It was about ego. Patricia Thornwell honestly believed rules belonged to whoever acted important enough to rewrite them. She confused confidence with authority. A lot of people do these days. The county hearing wrapped everything up about 3 months later. Patricia faced fraud charges, utility tampering charges, trespassing charges, and enough civil lawsuits to keep lawyers employed until retirement. I heard she tried relocating to Arizona afterward. No idea if she actually did. Honestly, I stopped caring. Because by then the ranch was peaceful again. Real peaceful. One cool October morning, I walked outside before sunrise carrying coffee while mist rolled low across the pasture. The backup generators sat quiet because the real power lines were finally stable again. Dad's oxygen machine hummed softly through the open porch window. Cattle moved slow through wet grass. Somewhere down near the creek, a mourning dove started calling into the morning fog. And for the first time in months, there were no HOA patrol trucks parked near my gates. No fake inspection tags. No emergency notices taped to fences. Just land. Quiet, honest land. Dad stepped onto the porch beside me wrapped in his old flannel blanket and looked toward the distant subdivision, lights barely glowing over the hill. Funny thing about power, he said. Everybody thinks it belongs to the loudest person in the room. I took a sip of coffee watching sunrise hit the transformer lines running across my ranch. No, I said quietly. It belongs to the people who actually earned the right to control it.